Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome back to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and today's guest isn't someone who's just talking about health and wellness. She's redefining it. Hilary Russo is a trauma-informed, holistic mental health expert, award-winning journalist, and international speaker. You might have seen her sharing her expertise on QVC or other TV stations across the U.S., where she breaks down self-care and healing in a way that actually makes sense. She's also the voice behind the globally ranked top 1.5% podcast, where she dives into real, inspiring conversations about turning trauma into triumph through health, healing, and humor. As if that wasn't enough, Hilary's also known for her Hug It Out method that helps people find self-healing through humor, understanding, and gratitude. And she's one of only 1,000 certified havening techniques practitioners in the world. If you're wondering what the heck havening is, stick around because we're going to get into that and so much more. Hilary, welcome to Message in the Middle.
Oh my gosh, it's such a pleasure to be here with you, Marianne. What a lovely introduction. Thank you.
I'm so excited to finally get to do this because we had wanted to do it several months ago and life was lifing.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned it to me because when we were at PodFest down in Orlando in January, you had reminded me that you connected with me. I was like, oh, I'm so glad when people do that because we tend to get in our stuff. We get busy being busy.
Yeah.
And I'm always grateful when somebody comes to me and says, hey, remember when? And I like to do that too, because look, we've got a lot of stuff going on in this world. So thank you for reaching out to me again. And here we are.
Before we jump in to some of the specifics about the work you're doing, I want to take a step back because one of the things I've learned since starting the show is that finding our way to our career or our hobby or our creative outlet that we're passionate about later in life tends to come via a very windy path. When I look at you and your career, though, I feel like it's almost always been there. You've had 30 years as a journalist. I mean, you anchored, you hosted, you were a health and wellness reporter. You had that path there with journalism and definitely could have stayed there, but you turned and are now focused more on holistic healing.
Yeah.
What pushed you toward that decision? What led you to really pull the wellness piece to the forefront?
If I had a nickel for every time I get asked that question, but it's something that I think about every day. Like, what if I had stayed on that course, right? But
Yeah.
life is a falling into, and my journey as a journalist started, during my college years because I was on the college radio, and then I did some internships in a big market and really saw what it was like to be in mainstream television news. And I was just so into the idea of being an informer or being a connector with people. And I love to write. So like writing and creating content is something that I've always been doing, and storytelling. These are all things that we talk about now. And everybody's a storyteller, which we are. Everyone is a content creator, which we are. But I was doing this at such an early stage. And I think for me, in the early stages, I realized I don't want to tell the death and destruction stories. I don't want to go out on stories that don't really have a human interest in the way that it's like making a positive impact on people. And I struggled with that in my early stages as an anchor and a reporter and a journalist, that those were not the kind of stories I really want to focus on. Even in a young age, when I first got my first job on air, and it was a NBC station in Louisiana, actually. And I remember pitching them the idea. I'm like, I'd love to be the consumer reporter because I don't like when people are had and I want to have a good outcome. Or I started a cooking show. Like I want to do cooking in people's kitchens or have them share something positive. And both ideas totally were accepted. And I had that. And from that early age, I actually had a lot of stuff that wound up on the news feed that were seen all over the country because different NBC stations would pick it up or pick up my consumer reporter stories, which is pretty cool when you're like a young journalist in your
Very
20s.
cool.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
seeing myself on like my grandmother would call. She's like, why are you rolling on a mattress? I'm like, oh, I'm doing a story on the best mattresses, Grandma. And she's like in Dallas, Texas, you know? So like I got a lot of that and it was cool to do that. But then, 9/11 hit. And that changed everything for me. I was already thinking about the next step because at the time I was married to an Air Force captain and we were getting stationed somewhere else. And, we were at the base actually where President Bush at the time, the second President Bush, he actually landed at our base from when he was reading to the kids in Florida after he found out, like we see that shot of him leaning over and being told something about the World Trade Centers.
Yeah.
And I'm a New Yorker, so like it really impacted me. And here I am married to a military member. You don't have a lot of pillow talk about military life and the media when you're living together. So there was a lot of separation. But I was also staying an hour and a half away covering stories on the 9/11 incident for days and days. And it wore on me. It really wore on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know at that time what secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma was, right? And even though that's what I do now, it's because of that experience that I moved out of like mainstream news and said, you know what, if I have a voice and I connect with others well, I'm telling the right kind of stories. And that kind of moved me into covering health and wellness journalism, not working for one station, but many. And also corporations, because every corporation seems to have broadcasting now. Like I was working for CVS and Aetna for 5 years as their health reporter. And then also, deciding how can I live better? Like, how can I take care of me? And that's a whole nother story. Cause again, it's like a falling into how I fell into holistic health. So I'll pause there, but that's how we kind of moved into holistic health. Cause I started asking questions. That's really where it starts, right? You're asking yourself questions.
Absolutely. Asking questions and getting curious. As you tell that story, I can't help but think about the fact that you had such conviction at such an early age and really knew what you wanted to work on and what you didn't and what made you feel good and what didn't. I think that stands out to me even more as you say here and tell the story because all that stuff about being on the news and how easy it would have been to get caught up in all of that. And you had the conviction to say, I don't want to do this. I want to do that. That was brave.
And it was hard because there were things that I turned down and didn't want to do. And there were stories I didn't want to cover. And not that I really ever said no to anything, but I sat there thinking, God, this is like, why are we putting this microphone in somebody's face talking about 9/11 right now? Like, could we let them grieve? And but then you realize there's another side of it. People have a voice. They want to share. And at 28, 29 years old, I'm not sure I really understood the full capacity of that. And I come from a field where growing up, I grew up with the Stud Turkles and I grew up with the CBS Sunday morning shows and Charles Kuraltz and the compassionate journalism, the storyteller journalism. That's the kind I learned from. And that's what I wanted to do. And I think news started to change,
It did. Yeah.
It started to change where the reporters were becoming the stories, then we get internet, everyone's blowing up and everyone's it just got very muddy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to stay true to it. And I decided to take a step back because when we moved and I had to leave my job anyway because we were moving. Interestingly enough, I put in my 30 days notice at my station. And then 2 weeks later, 9/11 happened. So I was still there for a short period of time. But then when I left, I took a break from news and I said, I need a break from this. And I went back into my first love, which was acting. That was my minor in college. And I started doing a lot of work as a host at that point, not an anchor, not a reporter. I started getting a lot of hosting gigs and working with PBS, which I loved working with public television. And then, being in that field for a while, it gave me a chance to kind of hone my skills and use my own personality
Mm.
and really come out more, not just being a hardcore news person, but somebody who people were tuning in because they're like, they liked Hilary. They were booking Hilary because Hilary has this engaging energy. And that's what I wanted people to feel like they were able to just talk to me, like they could listen to me like they were sitting on the couch with me. And so that kind of like moved me into the field of hosting. And then when I wound up moving back up north, which was some years later, QVC came calling. I started working with QVC. I'm still on their roster, and I've had many transformations at QVC. I started out there as the Westinghouse solar light girl. So I was like
Wow.
one of the totally. I didn't even have any outdoor space to put solar lights out because I was living in a New York City apartment. But my apartment, I'm pretty sure, could be seen from space.
Oh, that is so funny.
But it was that, and then sometime living in New York, I've been asked to host a number of online education videos for the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is the largest health coaching school in the world. I didn't even know what that was, and coming from a space where my dad was sick my whole life, and holistic was not a word we used in the home, even though my mom was very naturopathic and whatnot. I did all these videos and I really liked being around IIN, which is the Institute. And from that, I was like, maybe I'll look into health coaching because I had a health coach. I had
Mm.
someone that was guiding me. And I loved the idea of like community and being a part of something, which is something that happened for me when I went on a live streaming fitness show. I was on a show called Daily Burn 365 for 8 years, which was like kind of like the Today Show of fitness. And now there's many live streaming fitness shows, right? But we were the first, and we had health coaches, all the people that were participating that were on camera. And I fell in love with it. And then, Havening fell in my lap. So it's like life's a falling into all these things. I loved health coaching. I still love it. I still love health journalism. I still love talking about health, and now being able to support people with holistic mental health and their emotional well-being is like my jam. Like, you find yourself.
I love the idea that life is a falling into, and I think it's completely accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's true that for many of us, though sometimes it can be tricky, sometimes we can resist that. I think letting it just unwind and being open to where it takes us, that is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
But you seemed pretty open. You seem pretty open to following the path and seeing where you land.
I've taken a lot of risks.
Yeah.
I mean, I left my job as a news anchor and reporter with benefits and everything. And like, I pivoted before pivot was trendy.
Yeah.
I was doing remote work before it was a thing, and all of that has led to where I am today. And I look back and I think, wow, I've got quite a resume. And when people say, "Oh, you're not a journalist anymore," I'm like, "Oh, contraire. I mean, I am definitely a journalist at heart, and I still write and I still put myself out there. And corporations and companies might call me to do industrial corporate videos or live streaming. So that's still a big yes for me. And the one thing the last thing I took a dive into was podcasting. And that was because a friend of mine was like, "How come you don't have a podcast?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's just add one more thing to Hilary's plate."
It's the thing to do. But I think if you're a journalist at heart, it's not just the job, like being the anchor or writing the article. For me, it's all the characteristics that come with being a journalist too. It's the living curiously. It's the, asking all the questions. It's the way you do research. It's the way that you can look at things through various lenses. It's the storytelling. So I don't know. For me, I guess I'm just trying to say that I think there's probably a lot of journalists out there that don't hold a traditional journalist job.
We're all journalists. We're all civilian journalists. I mean, think about every time someone's pressing record on their phone to record something that gets captured. Basically, you're being a civilian journalist. Every time you're pressing record anywhere and getting content, there's some kind of storytelling that you're doing. Maybe not necessarily journalism, because I take that word seriously, but civilian journalism is basically an art of crafting something, putting words together with pictures, and being able to masterfully tell a story that people can like
Yeah.
really envision, whether it's being a podcaster or you're an influencer, which I don't really like that word, but um, I like the inspirer over
Yeah.
influencer.
I
Like
agree with
when
that.
people tell me I'm an influencer, I'm like, please don't call me an
Yeah.
influencer. I'm an inspirer.
Well, it's sort of one of those words, like I sort of have that revulsion to the word coach too,
Oh yeah.
because, everybody and their
Everyone's a
brother's a coach.
coach.
So yeah, we're
Right.
both rolling our eyes if you can't see us. But like anything else, you got to weed through, like, what are you looking for and who are you getting? Because there's a lot out there. All right. Well, I want to dig in a little bit about the topic. So when we met in person at Podfest and we started talking and you were talking about havening and you did a session there and all that. I didn't get to go to it, but we were talking a little bit about it. But the first thing I asked you is probably something other people are wondering too. What is it? And how do you get into something like this? Tell us a little bit about it. What's the 101?
So the one-on-one on havening is it is ultimately the most beautiful way of putting healing in your hands. And I'll tell you, like briefly, my own story about havening was basically another falling into, a girl walks into a bar is basically how it came into my life because
That's a
I
joke.
and I tell yeah, and I tell this story a lot on stages, on podcasts, because people want to know how do you fall into this after doing journalism and you're a holistic
Yeah.
health coach. And basically, that's how it happened. I mean, I went to a birthday party and a mutual friend that was having her birthday. I met this woman who was the COO of Havening, the organization. You know, the question you ask people, like, what do you do for a living? Oh, what do you do for a living? To
Yeah.
open up the line of dialogue. And I told her, I said, well, I'm a health journalist. I'm also a holistic health coach. And, did my little 30-second spiel. And she said, well, I'm part of the Havening organization. I'm a COO of Havening. Do you know what that is? And I'm like, no.
No.
I go, what is it? Which is basically what I still get. But
Yeah.
we're growing. I mean, we're growing in the last 8 years that I've been doing this. And it basically what well, I had her, I'll finish the story real quick. She asked if she could show me. And that's basically, it's still show, don't tell, right? And what she did was she said, well, wait, may I touch you? And I said, okay, here we are at this New York City bar. Go ahead. And she said, well, what I'd like for you to do is just think of something that may be causing you some upset or duress, or what's coming up for you right now that maybe you would like to see go away. And I thought of something. I thought of a number that it's associated with. What's the feeling? And then she said, may I touch you? And she told me first, because it's always a consent-based therapy. And she showed me it's like you're washing your hands, giving yourself a hug, touching your face, but she was doing it to me. And within like I would say it was less than 5 minutes. She did a short little havening experience on me. And I remember saying, I don't know what you did to me, but I want more of it. I don't know what you did, but whatever it was, I feel different. I feel lighter. And within a week, I was signed up for the 2-day workshop to see if I wanted to be certified in this practice. And that was like a 2-day workshop with the co-developing doctors and many of the trainers and the practitioners that have taken it. And it was in person in New York. And I knew right then and there because I volunteered to go on stage and be demoed and pick something really traumatic because it does de-encode trauma as well when you're in the support of a practitioner. And I did the death of my dad, which has stayed with me for 17 years up to that point. Like it still was so heavy on me because my father was sick my whole life. And within 10, 15 minutes of being havened on stage by Dr. Ron Rudin, who's one of the co-developers, Dr. Ron and Dr. Steve both created this approach. It was gone. Like the trauma and the upset and the narrative that I've been telling myself for so many years was no longer heavy on my shoulders. Yes, my father's still passed. Yes, I'm aware there's grief that's still there, but the way I see the grief and the loss and the passing never has returned. And I'll tell you now what havening is, but that's just giving you the setup of how it came into my life. But havening is basically, it's a neuroscience-based approach, neuroscience technique that uses touch and psychosensory. So that's the touch and positive thought, pleasant distractions. So anything could be a positive thought or pleasant distraction. It could be, singing a song, which activates the vagus nerve. It could be thinking of a really great vacation you went on or counting to 20. Anything that takes you outside of the upset and brings you peace and calm and joy is going to be a pleasant distraction or positive thought. The difference between havening is it doesn't keep you in the upset. you are aware of it, you're present with it, and then you kind of park it over here. And then what you're doing is you're creating a new way of thinking. You're creating new neural pathways because that amygdala, that part of your brain that's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, is designed to go to the negative. It is lazy. It likes to go to the negative. It's going to do everything it can to keep you alive and safe. That's its only job. Havening is like CPR for your amygdala, in that when you do the touch and you blend the touch with a positive thought, pleasant distraction, you are rapidly rewiring the brain. You are releasing oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, GABA. You are producing more delta waves, which are your sleep state brainwave, slowest moving brainwaves you have. And you do that because the touch is measured in hertz. And when you do it on your hands or on your shoulders to your elbows or gently on your face, we've found that that's where the most amount of hertz are created. So you're producing more of those delta hertz brainwaves, the sleep state. And that's where you can find the sense of calm, and you find that you're self-regulating. So you can do this anytime, anywhere. You can self-apply it for the everyday upsets. And then when you're working through deeper related traumas, getting to the root of the issues, that's where Hilary comes in. That's where a practitioner like myself who's trauma informed and also a trainer. So I train doctors, therapists, teachers, first responders to use this tool to support themselves so that they can support others, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. While you were talking and you were describing it, I was thinking about EFT, which I'm not an expert at, but there's similarities, right? Some of the points where you're touching your hands, your face, your arms, they're similar. What I remember about talking to the EFT coaches was that it was more about talking through how you felt about something. So changing that narrative, changing the narrative that you have associated with something, whatever it is you're trying to get through or do. And what I heard you here say was, while it changed the narrative that you had around your dad's death, I think I heard a nuance of more creating a different feeling. So is it more about the feeling versus the talk track?
So the similarities between tapping, EFT, and havening is that they're both touch therapies, right? Because one is the meridian points, you're tapping. And to answer your question, yes and no.
Okay.
Because where the similarities are with tapping, and we have many practitioners who are also tapping practitioners as well. You know, there's a lot of overlap, which is beautiful.
That would make sense.
Oh, yeah. Tapping, EMDR, licensed therapists. I mean, there's so many beautiful modalities to put in what I call your brain candy jar. What I think differs about tapping and havening is that tapping tends to be, you know, that touching, that constant touching, right? On the meridian points, which I find to be more of a masculine energy.
Okay.
That constant touch. Havening is the nurturing approach of a feminine energy. It's the mothering that we don't give to ourselves. So when you are self-havening, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen people in tears, like, I need touch, because it's a gentle touch. It's what you do to your child when they fall and skin their knee and you pick them up and say, you're okay, you're safe. Because havening is actually a transitive verb for the word haven, a safe place. And your amygdala does not feel safe when it's in danger. And your amygdala doesn't know time or space. So if you were to watch something on TV, or somebody tells you about a car accident, or you are just start thinking about something negative, your amygdala goes into action like, she's not safe. We got to do something. And then all of a sudden you're feeling and you're sensing and your heart racing and all of the different, everything's going on in your body to keep you safe. Whereas it might not even have anything to do with you. Right?
Yeah.
Which kind of comes back to the secondary traumatic stress. Like, I wasn't at 9/11, but I was listening to stories every day, putting a microphone in people's faces and watching the news feeds with all the devastation. And up until I covered the pandemic, I covered the opioid crisis. I was hearing a lot of stuff. And it's like, the first thing I always hear, especially when I'm training and working with doctors and therapists and nurses, is that they're like, gosh, we never think about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't really help anyone else until you are doing some self-care and self-regulation. You're being a disservice to others if you're not being a service to yourself.
I think people don't even realize, to your point, that they were subject to some trauma based on somebody else's, your best friend had a big loss and they're telling you about it all the time. Or I don't know, you can name a zillion things, but I think we don't necessarily walk away thinking that impacted us as well.
Right. And that's definitely a big area like a lot of people just see it, think it's overwhelm or, or maybe they're burned out. And yes, those might be outcomes to it, but you actually might have an impact from secondary traumatic stress that's causing you to be hypervigilant, that's causing you to feel tired, that's causing the emotions and being short with your spouse or your colleagues. We think it's just burnout, and it's a lot of times it's not.
Is there a way to identify that?
I think being aware, there are a number of tips and tools that we go through. I'm actually writing a lot about that in my book. And one thing that I really feel that an awareness is the first step to any change.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Like having the awareness is the first step to any change. So if you're aware, you know what am I feeling right now? And if you stopped and you're like, okay, that happened, and then you start havening and you start thinking about something pleasant and peaceful, and your amygdala suddenly thinks, oh, wait, I'm on a beach in Jamaica. What's going on here? And so going back to your point before, is it like you're just thinking of something positive? Yes and no. The pleasant distractions, the working memories, there are times when we're doing deeper trauma work that you might bring up the emotion and you might just be saying it and saying it and saying it. And somehow it's kind of transpiring out of you because it's just a word, right? But there's different types of havening depending on how you're supporting someone. It's not just like touch yourself, think of something happy.
Yeah.
That's the way that I would say if anyone wanted to do it to themselves, positive affirmations are a great way. Like the I am statements, there's nothing more powerful than the word I am. It's what follows that matters, because you can be, I am, exhausted, or I am looking to find better ways to sleep. That's more empowering, right?
Yeah.
That's the resiliency in how we speak to ourselves. And with havening, the beauty of it is, like I said, it can be self-applied. And when you use it and you start thinking of something really peaceful and calming and joyful, or sing a song, or count to 20, or, tell a bedtime story to a child that's not being able to fall asleep, and you're just soothing, doing it on their hands or on their little face, they're going to find that you're releasing those really beautiful, happy chemicals that can't do anything but release the oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. I mean, that's the love hormone, that's the happy hormone, and it's your body doing exactly what it needs to do to give you a safe space, a safe haven.
Most of listeners will be just audio. You keep doing the motions, and it's just the softest touch of just like running one hand over the other hand, or running your hand across your cheek, or giving yourself. We all know how to hug ourselves, but just gently. You do it super gently.
I'll share it with you in a very easy way so those who are just tuning in can do it, because I actually do have people that just listen to me on audio, and I do the same thing. So the easiest way to do it is like you're washing your hands, just gently washing your hands, even going back and forth on a pendulum, like just being really, just whatever's comfortable to you. There's really no rules. It's like you're washing your hands. That's one havening touch. The second havening touch is like you're crossing your arms and going from your shoulders down to your elbows, a gentle motion from shoulders down to elbows, and just gently caressing and soothing touch from upward to downward. You want to go down because that's the way like the hair follicles go on your, right? And very soothing. Or on your face, like you're giving yourself a nice facial. You can even cross your arms and it feels a little different. It feels like somebody's actually touching you when you just cross your arms. But any or all three of these, like you're giving yourself a nice facial, or just gently touching your face, putting moisturizer on kind of feeling, or doing it on your hands, or from shoulders down to elbows, are the three havening touches. And what we found, those touches do tend to produce more of the delta waves, many times more hertz, which is like 90 times more, especially on the face. So if you do that and there's no choreography, you can do any or all three of them. You can go back and forth. You can stay with your hands. And if someone is actually not comfortable touching their skin, because there are people that have adverse reaction. They just don't feel comfortable with that. Use a pillow, use a soft blankie that you love. I have some kids that, I've worked with children who have been abused and maybe touch is scary. I'll have them do it on a plushie toy, their favorite blankie, just getting them used to touch, because touch is essential for human connection. And if you start there, it's amazing what you can do. Amazing how you can change the neurobiology and just create those new neural pathways that let you know I'm safe and I'm okay.
And what do you say to people that say, oh, that's too woo-woo for me? That's what do you say to
that?
Get that. You do get that, yeah?
Yes, and of course. Yeah. And sometimes it's not, anything that's uncomfortable to somebody is going to take them back. And I'm always like, yay you for trying something new. I can see how it's seen as woo-woo because it's not mainstream, but this is neuroscience. There's studies behind it. There are doctors like Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Dan Amen that are talking about it. There are big names in the world of neuroscience and mental health that are starting to talk about havening, because we realize that neuroplasticity is a thing. 25 years ago, we didn't think the brain could change.
Right.
You got to a certain age and that's it. Now we're realizing we can create new neural pathways in the brain, and that we have tools, and that we are a holistic whole body that has the ability to change and heal ourselves. And I'm not saying that modern medicine and Western medicine is not a good thing. Thank goodness we have it. Yeah. But, we also live in a very pharma sick care system. Yeah. And there's more doctors, actually, believe it or not, there are doctors that are walking away from their very successful practices to go into integrative medicine and holistic health. And they're opening their own practices and taking risks because they know that this is a possibility, that you have the ability to heal yourself. And so when I hear that, the first thing I say is, why don't you try it? And I have had people, I'll tell you one thing. I sat at Podfest with a big military guy, because there was the military con happening there too. And coming from the background where I have a military background, I sat there with him, and he sat there on the couch with me, and I went through the whole havening with him in front of people walking by. I said, "Are you comfortable with this?" He's like, "Yeah, bring it on." And afterwards he's like, "Can you be on my podcast?" I get that a lot because, again, it's not a tell, it's a show and tell. Yeah. And I think once people try it, they're comfortable with it. However, some people just aren't comfortable with touch. And I respect that too, because there are many modalities out there that you can try, many things. And listen, I will be the first one to tell you, in addition to that, and my partner, my boyfriend, is very open to talking about this, but he also works in a very male-dominated government job. And he is so into doing this work because he's like, we need this out there in the work field, in the government sector, because it's a very male dominated field where even as doctors, which is not all male dominated, but even in these lines of work where people are not allowed to be weak, because weakness means we're going to just have you pushing pencil in the back room. It's scary. We've scared people to fear. You shouldn't be doing this. You can't have mental health issues. But the strength comes in recognizing that you have something you want to work on.
Yes.
Yes. That's the strength.
I agree with that. And I think, thankfully, that is getting a little better.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I do think the more we talk about it, the more we put it out there, the more we realize there's only good to come out of that. So
absolutely.
Let's hope that keeps continuing to go in that direction. Mm-hmm. And I also think that, you referred to it a few times, our parents, even us as kids, holistic, I don't remember that word. I don't remember knowing that word. So we know more. We have to do better. That's all there is to it, right? We have to try to keep moving forward. And these are some of the things that can help with that.
Yeah, definitely. When I was growing up, the most amount of holistic thing you did, and that word, again, did not even know what it meant. By the way, it means whole body approach. It was going to a yoga class, which was woo-woo then, even though it wasn't woo-woo because there's scientific backing to that. Look, the the real fathers of holistic medicine, and we're talking hundreds of years ago, if not longer, they knew
Yeah.
the cultures that are the indigenous cultures that are so close to the land and believe in plant-based medicine and healing and om,
Yeah.
the om is like activating the vagus nerve. This isn't just a bunch of people getting around making an om sound. These are people that realize the vibration in the body is healing.
Yeah.
So if we just understand the somatic work has benefits, and soma means body, by the way. Somatic work is so important, and somatic work backed by neuroscience, which havening is, it's just giving something a chance. And if it's not for you, that's fine, but be open to the possibility that it could be for many others.
I'm curious as to what the biggest challenge, like, is there a pattern of people struggling once they're introduced to this that is common, or does everybody just do it and they love it? Or is it hard? Is it hard for some people to get into it? Are there any obstacles there that repeat?
I think for me, I have not actually, knock on wood, to this day, people that try it love it.
That's great.
And when I have a client, it's not a one time client. Now, my thing I always say, and I stand behind this, that the antithesis of what I do is I never want to see you again.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to keep you. I don't want to be your healer.
Yeah.
That's another word that I don't really like, because I feel like the only healing I could do is on me. But I'm a guide by your side to help you on your healing journey, to give you tools to put the healing in your hands. And I think a lot of that really comes from Dr. Ron and Steve Rudin, who really said, we don't own this. We might have developed this. We might have really spent the last 25 years developing this beautiful approach, but we don't own it. Touch has been around since the dawn of time. What we're doing is we're just sharing with you how working together this with that, creating this beautiful formula, this dance in a way, is where the magic really happens and where we're seeing the change in the brain.
I love that.
And
yeah.
And that's really what it's about.
Well, and it takes people to pull it together, right? I mean, you have to be able to do the connection of the dots. So yes, the data's out there, and yes, we know some things work, but somebody spends the time to pull that together and come up with the solution. So good on them for that.
And constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a constant too, because look, studies are expensive.
Yes.
Doing actual scientific studies are not cheap. And we have a number of havening practitioners who are doctors, who are neuroscientists, and they're putting out some of their own money to do it. And we've got some really big names talking about it. Even in the Mind Valley community, there's so many people who are starting to really give it some cred because it's there. And I think before we know it, we're going to see more people doing it, even though there's only a handful of people that are practitioners, and 1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, right?
It's not a lot. I was going to ask you that. Like, as somebody who's now training people, where do you see this in 5 years? Do you think in 5 years it's like a household thing and everybody knows?
I've seen it grow by leaps and bounds just in the last 5 years. I started on this journey in 2018, and then I jumped into a pandemic, and I'm building a business, a health coaching, a health practitioner, emotional health business in a pandemic when people needed it more. And I feel like that, there was a gift in the pandemic, and that was I was able to offer my services virtually, which helped a lot of people who couldn't see their therapists or couldn't see their practitioners. And it made me a better practitioner. It really did, because I had learned on site. I learned by being going to, monthly events in New York City when I was living there at the time, being around my fellow hypnotists and my fellow havening practitioners and my fellow health coaches and doctors. And I learned by being present in the space. And then COVID hit, and I had to do everything online, and we took everything online. And while I already had been in the online world, because, college professor, was teaching online and in person, Zoom wasn't new to me, but it became everything to me. Right.
Yeah.
So, I think it gave people a possibility. And now we're seeing that you don't have to be in the space with people to
Yeah.
do havening. It's just as effective to do it through the internet as it is to do it in person. Like I have clients at my clinic where I live in person that want me to do the physical havening touch on them. But then I have probably more clients that have the freedom of being able to be in their home or wherever they are and do it with me as I facilitate them self-havening. I have the sessions online. That's the beauty of it.
You could be in your PJs and be all comfy and just, yeah.
Yeah.
That to me seems like it would be an advantage,
Yeah.
definitely, not a disadvantage.
It is. And honestly, I share havening every month. I do a havening happy hour, which is my gift to the world, where I do a free havening happy hour, which is basically a havening meetup. Every month I pick a theme. I just had one this past week, and people come on the Zoom and I guide a havening experience. You don't need to tell me what the problem is, because that's the beauty about this work that is very different from traditional therapy. You don't have to be content rich. You don't have to come in and just blah, tell me everything that's going on. You can come in and just say, I just want to haven. I don't know anything.
Oh, I
Now,
like
the
that.
trust, yes. Sometimes people don't want to re-traumatize and re-trigger by talking through their problem.
Or share it. They're
That's-
just not comfortable yet.
Right.
So I'm glad you said that.
So in the havening happy hour, in a group experience, first of all, I don't do trauma in group, but I can have you and guide you while you're taking yourself through the havening and the place that you want to be. And I'm just guiding you and watching and making
Love
sure
it.
you're doing it. And it is such a beautiful experience to where people that might have a number of like, they're, stressed at a level 10, by the end of the session, they're coming down to a 0 and their word is peace. It happens, and it happens a lot because you're basically befriending your amygdala and letting it know it's okay and it's safe. And it can be as little as 10 minutes.
What a great offering. And if you don't want to be on camera, I assume you don't have to be on camera.
No.
I'm just saying it out loud for people that want to come to
Of
one
course.
of them, right?
I
mean,
encourage people to be on camera.
So I think that, gosh, what a great gift that is. But also for anybody that's just a little bit curious, you've got 0 to lose except for
0.
however minutes. You're going to give up a few minutes if you go to it, right? But that's it.
Yeah. And I've had some people lurk and come in, and then suddenly I get an email like, I'm a first responder, and I think this would be great to have this skill. When is your next training? So people get certified or just learn the basics, because I have a 2-step process that we have in havening where you can just take the 2-day workshop and learn the fundamentals and the neuroscience and the history and the different kinds of havening that you can do, and not use it in the workplace, not use it as a profession, just for yourself and your family. Or you can go on and do certification and become a practitioner, and then you're able to be considered a certified practitioner. I mean, there's options, but sometimes people I have people that have been coming since I started it, which was the first week of the pandemic.
Wow.
I do it every month.
You've definitely gotten more focused or more havening forward, I'll say, because I think it's what I hear you talking about the most now. So is this where you see yourself spending most of your time?
I think so. And it's not so much, I still do one-to-ones, obviously, but, I know my superpowers are my voice and my connection to others. And, it's in the name, Hilistically Speaking. I've been speaking for years. I don't know life without being with a microphone in front of me. And that's a gift that I'm not going to take advantage of. And so, speaking at conferences, speaking in groups, I've been really fortunate to do keynotes at like caregiver events and anything where people want to bring mindfulness and mental health into their space, because we're seeing more of the corporate wellness, which is like the fastest growing industry right now.
Yes.
So if I can put this in front of more people, imagine what this world would be like if just more people have tools to just down regulate, to self-soothe, and we're talking like some of these people are like, C-suite executives that don't really want to sit there touching their hands and stuff in public, but you're rubbing your hands all the time. You don't even realize it, And if you just give yourself 5 minutes sitting at your desk, nobody knows what you're doing. Before you walk in a meeting, before you, go on that first date, before you are trying to go to sleep at night. I have sleep apnea. I use it before I go to bed. And there's no age that's off limits with this either. I have children who are 5 up to 85 that are working this into their practice. Imagine if every school had this,
Yeah.
Marianne.
No, I can. And I was one of those people, like I'll tell you, when I started looking into and talking to people about tapping and EFT, I was like, really? I don't know. But I will also tell you, I've found myself on more than one occasion squeezing these, I'm squeezing my fingers.
Right.
Because you can do, that's one you can do. You can be anywhere with anybody, not even noticing, under the table, wherever you are, whatever. And it does really bring you right. I want to say down. It just kind of levels you out really quickly.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big believer at first. So I think the more that we can put the tools out there and get people used to them, even just talking about them, that's a positive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, as you said, is this more of the journey for me? It definitely is. I am very grateful because being a trainer wasn't just something like I could sign up and be a trainer. They picked me, and there's only 50 of us in the world. And that, again, that's something I take very seriously. Like you have to go through a process. The doctors have to write off on it. And I know the doctors, they know that I really believe in this work, and it's something that means a lot to me because I want to heal, but I also want to give people that gift as well. It's matching their mission, really. So being able to train others, being able to just speak in settings where I can share it as a tool, as part of like what I call hugging it out, right? The hug it out method incorporates havening into it, and hug it out is an acronym for healing. In the healing, you have humor, because there's always humor in
in the crazy.
Even in the moment where you don't feel the humor, right? In the crazy, there's always laughter in the lesson.
For sure.
There's a message in the mess, right?
Or a message in the middle, but yeah.
You might not realize it then, but
yeah.
That's how you start doing the healing, is realizing, okay, maybe it wasn't as bad, or even if it was, I can laugh at the little things, even grief, right?
Yep.
And then there's understanding. That's the you. It's in the healing, we have to have an understanding of who we are and how we're showing up in this world. Who are we? And then it's the gratitude. It always bring the gratitude. And gratitude is not about outside sources. It's not like I'm grateful for, the house I live in, and I'm grateful for my partner. I'm grateful for being an amazing person. I'm grateful for being that I'm able to support myself. I'm grateful that I can pay my bills. I'm grateful that I am a good friend. I'm grateful that I'm thinking of new tools to put in my toolbox or my brain candy jar. It's having self-appreciation and gratitude.
That's a big
twist. That's a hard one. That's a
hard one.
So that's the hug it out. Like, that's living the hug it out way, is really hugging it out, making amends with your own mind, because we're always hugging it out with other people when we're upset.
Yeah.
But when do you hug it out with yourself?
Yeah.
And havening is part of that. It's a tool, and just happens to be that the self-hug is part of it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why
I
call myself the chief of hugs.
I love that. Why not?
Why not?
Oh, I love this. I love all the work you're doing, and
thank you.
It's inspiring, but I also think I do think it's going to help people. And listen, I think even if something doesn't work for you, it might work for somebody else. So to your point, there might be a child in the household that needs something different, or a grandchild, or a friend, whatever. If it's something that you can share with somebody else, if you're listening and if you don't think it's right for you, maybe you can share it with a friend that it might work for. So I love that.
Yeah. I'll give you two quick examples of, like, on both ends of the spectrum. I had one of my first clients was a 5-year-old, and he's now, oh gosh, he's got to be 8 or 9 now. Anyway, first child, had a pretty tough home life and loved Broadway. And look, my background's theater, so I could get into some Broadway tunes. And what I would do with him when he was feeling his feels and not feeling safe in his home because, there was a parent that wasn't very kind, I taught him to use havening when he was not that he was unsafe in the home, but just like feeling his feelings. Yeah. He was acting out. And he would just sing Broadway songs. And I can't tell you how many videos I'd get from his mom sending little clips of him like walking around singing Lion King, doing havening. And like where he is today is night and day.
Love that.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, and I use this one as an example because my mom comes to my havening happy hours, by the way. She loves havening. My mom lost her husband, my stepdad, about 2.5 years ago. And grief has been hard on my mom, and she has been doing havening with me. and also on her own, and finds that from doing the self-touch, especially with crossing the arms, she feels like he's present.
Oh, I
So
love
like, because
that.
she's missing that touch, and that along with her other, other things that she uses it for, helps her sleep. And my mom is, and she'll be okay with me saying this, my mom's in her 80s.
Love that.
We'll leave it in the 80s. But there's no space in between where this cannot work if you're just willing to try.
That's the key.
You know,
That's the
that's
key.
just, you won't know unless you try.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for all the work you're doing and the free monthly
Yeah.
sessions.
Yeah.
So we can put a link to that.
Yes, I'd love that. I can share a link on how you can sign up and just register for the Havening Happy Hours. Like I said, they're every month. We pick a theme. And I also, if you're open to it, I also have a Hug It Out 5-day challenge,
Yeah.
which includes a havening, like a little video havening session with me and some of the other elements that are in my Hug It Out book that we're still working on. It's actually in process, so I'm excited to start working on that. Like now that it's the proposals out and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, really excited. Maybe, who knows, by the time this drops,
You can come back and talk about it.
definitely. It's been a labor of love. And,
Oh, that's great.
and this is a 5-day challenge that is in the Hug It Out book. And it's just giving you different ways to be kind to your mind,
I love that.
Mhm.
And I love the twist on having gratitude for yourself, because just even thinking about that, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really good shift for people. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And where can people find you most? The podcast, of course, but
Yeah.
is that where most of your content is these days, or are you putting other content out there often?
Yeah. So I record Hilistically Speaking, HIL, not HOL, Hilistically Speaking.
We'll put the link. Go ahead.
Great. It's a weekly podcast. It's on every podcast platform. I'm also on YouTube. I'm building the YouTube, and I'm starting to put more videos on YouTube again. And that is where, if you want to watch, that's great. And there's small little YouTube content that I'll put out on occasion. And that's just Hilary Russo, my name. But also, I'm on Instagram a lot.
Okay.
Which is, again, Hilary Russo, but I'll share all my social and connect with me. I'm one of those people that does engage. I do engage.
And people love that. And
Yeah.
it is, I always like to ask where the best place is, because, and these guys know, like, I'll roll my eyes again, but the socials, like, there's just,
Yeah. There's so many.
And it's getting worse.
There's so many. There's constantly a new one, but I will say, whatever platform that I'm on and I share, and of course, LinkedIn, all of those, I will respond. I put time aside because I know that connection is important. I know engagement is important, and I'm not untouchable. Even no matter where I am in this world, I will never allow myself to be untouchable, because I think that is something I take really seriously.
That makes me think of I can't even remember the conversation or what prompted you to say it, but when we were at Podfest and we were having that, there was a group of us having a meal together.
Lunch.
It was a lunch. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you
lovely.
said something like, we're all somebody. Like, we're all somebody. And you just said it with the most ease, like it just rolled off your tongue, like, yeah, we're all the same and we're all sludging through it all together. But it was, that was kind of the sentiment behind it. Like,
oh, I know what I said. Did I say
What did you say?
I said we're all just walking each other home.
yes, that was part of it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not that, honestly, I can't take credit for that. I use that one a lot. That's actually Ram Dass, who has since passed. He was a spiritual guru. And I think it comes from a Rumi quote originally, but it was the title of his book. But in my mind, I think that every time. I'm like, I am never, or in no way, better than anyone else. I don't care what your bank account is, whether it's zero or millions. We are all just walking each other home, because in the end, we wind up in the ground. And you don't want to be the richest person in the cemetery, and you don't want to be someone who goes there with nobody who cared about you and that you cared about them, period.
I love that sentiment. And I'll just say one more note on Podfest, because I've talked about this in person to so many people. The difference I found in Podfest as opposed to, a gazillion other conferences I've been to in the, corporate financial services, so corporate world, it's exactly what you just said. The biggest keynote speaker there was sitting in the audience learning from somebody else about the specific example I gave on my last episode was they were learning about YouTube. But the point is, like, everybody's just doing the thing. They're just walking through life doing the thing. And yes, some of us are better at one thing than the other thing. So what?
But we learn from each other.
Yes. Yes, literally one of the biggest reasons I did this show.
We learn from each other.
Yes.
The one thing I always say about Holistically Speaking, and I say this a lot when people come on my show, it's a masterclass for me.
Yes.
Like I have some really amazing top level experts that come on my show just as much as I have, somebody who might just have a really good story.
Yep.
But even that person is a masterclass for me because I can't know everything.
100%.
And that's why you're coming on, because I'm curious. Like I'm saying, this is kind of cool. I wonder what other people will think. Like know your audience, right?
Yes.
So I sit there and think, wow, this is like totally getting a masterclass in this and that and the other thing. And then I refer those people because they are a master in what they do.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And it's so, so true. Well, thank you. This has been delightful. I'm so glad we got to talk, and thank you for sharing all of the work you're doing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a gift to be here in the space with you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.